Welcome to Leaders and Laggards.
Welcome again to the Leaders and Laggards session. We're going to talk today with Dave and Ken and Jeff. Our topic today is about leadership styles. We have quite a few list of leadership, and we're going to be listing some of those, the most common leadership styles, and share with you some of our insights about these leaderships, how they differ, how they're so common, and give you some examples actually of some real world leaders, how they manage on a daily basis. Dave, on a high level, please let us know the most common leadership styles that you know of.
You know, in thinking about this week, it came to me relatively easy. I gotta be honest. So I think without a doubt, for me and probably a lot of folks that are engaged in helping people with leadership development, the most common form of leadership style that I come across is an autocratic style. Right now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody in the company is an autocrat, but what it does mean is that without fail, every organization that I interview as a potential client has autocratic leaders sprinkled throughout the ranks. I haven't run into one yet that doesn't. Now, that's a challenge because if we don't get past that level, then the transformation is likely not going to be what it otherwise could, right? So for me, when I'm describing an autocratic leader, I'm talking about somebody that is they're going to seek to have centralized control, and they're going to make sure that they are getting a performance through their resources. Now, whether those resources are human or whether they're mechanical or otherwise, it doesn't really matter, but they're going to get their performance through those resources. They don't really seek or seem to need a lot of stakeholder input, right? That's not necessarily important to them. What is important, however, is that they're going to have most likely really strict rules and procedures in place. And there's not going to be a lot of doubt about who is in charge, right? Although the other thing is going to be that it's also going to be obvious that they are the ones that can bend those rules if they see fit, right? So the rules might be for everybody else, but for them, we can bend those rules if needed. So I would say that these are the folks that, you know, if you read Good to Great, right? Jim Collins coined these people as the geniuses with 1,000 helpers, right?
Exactly.
For me, I always say that these people have to realize that while they have a position, right? They have that title. They also have to realize that when it comes to leadership, they're probably at the lowest level of leadership. So that is the most common one I come across without question.
Very good.
I think that's hilarious, Dave, in that I'd kind of picked that one out and I was going to save that one kind of for last. I thought, these guys aren't going to talk about that one because probably viewed negatively. We'll talk about all these other ones that are soft and touchy and feely, and we won't talk about that. And it just makes me laugh that was the first one you brought up. My question, Dave, for you is there a place still in today's world for an autocratic leader? What organizations can benefit from that style of leadership?
I think I hesitate to jump out and say there's an organization that can benefit, but what I will say is that there are instances, maybe there's crisis instances where autocratic leadership probably fits, right? Because we don't have a lot of time to build a team at this point. We've got a fire that we have to deal with right now. So in crisis management, maybe there's room for an autocratic, we just need to get stuff done, right?
I think I know you talked a few weeks ago in one of our first podcasts about military stuff, and that was kind of an example that comes to me as, you know, you're in the military, and that I think fits right in with your crisis example. Is okay, we're in a war, or in some kind of conflict, there's not time to have a team meeting to decide what the best course of action is. I mean, you got to have somebody who's in charge. So that was one example. I just think in organizations day to day, kind of, I think what you're saying is maybe not so much room for that anymore.
Yeah, I don't think there is. And to be honest with you, I think when you have to pull that autocratic lever, that might not be the CEO or what you would think of as the top level in the organization that's going to pull that lever. It might just be somebody in the organization that just can get shit done.
You know,
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
things when I was thinking about this a little bit this week, and I Googled trying to find an example of a autocratic type leader, and the first one that came up was Martha Stewart, which was kind of surprising to me.
Yeah.
But I guess she rules with a pretty heavy hand.
Yeah.
You know, and being as that we're in the time that we're in, also a person on that list is going to be Vladimir Putin, right? He is definitely an autocratic leader.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. We jump to Ken. Anything you want to add on other leadership styles?
I think the one that I kind of that resonates a lot with me, and when I'm working with people that I'd like to use more of a coaching leadership style.
Good.
You know, and because that's really about developing people for the future.
Absolutely.
And that's really at the stage and where I am at within my career is about giving back and helping build people for the future. And it's, you know, it's more of a, you know, if I was going to describe it, it's like, try this. And to me, and even though it's not necessarily a leadership style, but to me, it really goes hand in hand with mentoring too, because mentoring is really truly about developing people for the future, whereas coaching is more about kind of more immediate and shorter term accountability.
Good point.
When I was going in and you know, when would I use that type of leadership style coaching? Is to improve performance and to develop people's strengths. And when I was trying to think of an example of a leader that exhibits some of those, having grown up in the Chicago area, the one that came to my mind is Phil Jackson, and how he really built the Bulls up to be during the Michael Jordan era, and brought in the people with the right strengths to really bring out the best in everybody on the team and to get a greater whole.
Well done. Coaching, coaching style is a sports, athletic. That's what people train, develop, and big win. And the development of the team, it's interesting. The Tuckman's model: forming, storming, norming, and performing.
Sometimes, but I know that on Saturdays during football season, you see a lot of coaches that are
storming
more into the leadership style that Dave talked about. So.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My way. I told you so. What have you? Okay, Jeff. I want to jump to you now. What's your what you're going to talk about leadership? Which one is yours?
Yeah, the one, Ray, that I wanted to just kick off talking about was probably one that I think I rely on and have relied on myself, and it really is maybe kind of a little bit of a mix between a democratic style and maybe a hands-off style. Like one of my personal pet peeves has always been, just really have disliked when I worked for a micromanager. There was a time, long time ago, I had a guy that I worked for that it just seemed like he was constantly looking over my shoulder and just drove me nuts, to the point that I didn't leave the company, but I found a different position in the company just because I didn't like it so much. And so I think because of that, I probably choose that leadership style of kind of hands off. Here's what I need you to do. Let me know if you have a problem. And, kind of maybe the opposite of Dave's autocratic, it's kind of like, I'm going to trust that I want to set good expectations, and I'm going to trust that you are going to execute on them. And if you can't, we'll talk. And, so, I think that's probably my natural style. And, maybe it kind of bleeds over a little into the democratic style, where If you've got a team, I probably maybe try to go out of my way to not be the autocrat and say, let's get team buy-in and input as we make decisions. And then I'm not sure if we're going to get here. I don't know if I want to go too deep into it, Ray, because I don't want to get too far ahead of you, but I think it's really important that we talk about natural versus adaptive leadership styles tonight.
Yeah.
So I don't want to get too far ahead of you, though.
That's good. Thank you. Yep. I want to talk about laissez-faire, but also others. But laissez-faire is interesting. You guys mentioned autocratic. Laissez-faire is totally the opposite, the offhands laissez-faire, and interesting. And the industry or what kind of businesses they operate in laissez-faire. But I'm going to give you one just to kind of break the ice. Warren Buffett is a laissez-faire leader.
Mm-hmm.
But how they manage is by finance, by numbers. So, hey, he hands off, just give me the numbers, right? Just, the returns on investment. And you do it your way. My goal is make money, right? And then he just hands off. You do what you want to do, merge, hire, fire, whatever you want to do. Just get me the money. Interesting. Autocratic, obviously controllable, low trust, my way, and I'm gonna, here's how you get it done. Go get it. I hired you to do certain things. Go do them, come back, and so forth. It's totally interesting. But we'll talk about different styles, transformational. For example, one of my greatest example is Jeff Bezos from Amazon.
Right.
This guy, he challenged people. He go do innovation, be creative, leverage everything, hire the best, and they do the best. So they very, very highly selective, and they know what they want, and they big on innovation and new technology. Like you saw now, they open a new store in DC. You go grab any item and you go to the checkout, it knows how much stuff, so you don't need to scan. But the cameras and everything working in the store, but interesting stuff. So I'll stop.
When you think about transformational, though, you think of blue sky thinking and that type of thing, but it's also a very aggressive and demanding leadership style, and especially when you think about how Bezos has gotten to where he's gotten. I mean, it's not through always being a nice guy.
No, you're right. Risk. He's big on risk, but again, it's accountability, responsibility. He's willing to hands the reins, and then he challenged the people. Big on innovation and creating new things and leveraging. Interesting, their model versus to deliver the products, but then they became a supply chain. As good as UPS and FedEx the next day, and with inventories and even buyers, it evolved so many things, and now they got into different like videos and music and Whole Foods. But it's really transformational, and he's really got. There's a lot of inspiration and participation, and their pay model is in stock options, and so there's a lot of things going on. Risk and reward and so forth. I want to go back to our conversation and hit on some of the questions we were gonna talk. Can you provide some examples, leadership styles, famous leaders, organizations, companies, where you can see it and it's clearly those leadership styles very evident?
If you guys don't mind, I wouldn't mind starting off with this one.
Sure, Dave, go for it.
And so kind of the antithesis to the most popular style I run across, I would say that the most aspired to style, when people call me, a lot of times they say, this is what we want our organizational culture to be. And that's That's that servant leadership style,
Mhm.
right? And so,
Yeah.
you know, if you think about a servant leadership style, a lot of times people, you know, I'm sure if you did a Google search on it right now, what you'd see is the definition is that you take that org chart and you turn it upside down and kind of start from there. And I think that's a fair representation, but how I generally come across the clients on it is I'll say, let's look at yourself as the orchardist that's in charge of an apple orchard or any kind of fruit orchard. I don't care what it is, but that orchardist would take the approach to say, my job is to make sure that every tree and piece of fruit within my orchard grows to its fullest potential. And if there were a tree having an issue, or if there were a piece of fruit that wasn't developing, rather than yelling at or blaming that tree or that piece of fruit for being wrong, they would apply the love and caring that's required to get that piece of fruit or that tree to its fullest potential. And so that's what people seem to want to go to. But I'll tell you, when you sit in the front of, it's been my experience, when you sit in the front of a group of CEOs or C-level employees and you say, look, guys, we're going to turn your org chart upside down, and your responsibility really is to be that nurturer, right? You need to be just as much as that orchardist grew that orchard full of apples to their fullest potential. You
Wow.
need to be developing your entire organization to their fullest potential, right? So, a good example of that, and I think you know, they're fairly well regarded of this. And if you haven't caught wind of this already, I am definitely a fanboy of Southwest Airlines. But what Herb Kelleher did down there, following, and not initially and not recently, they haven't been probably following that behavior of servant leadership quite as well as they did in those midterm years. But I mean, there was 35 years of straight profit in the airline industry. That's incredible. You don't have to spend very long on their website to understand that type of leadership has permeated the entire industry, and it's why they are where they are now. There's a reason that, you know, a couple times a year people sign up months in advance to go study their culture, and it's because their culture is all about servant leadership.
Absolutely.
So for
Thank
me,
you.
that's where I want people to go, right? If you're gonna grab a leadership style and say, let's build our culture around it, I'd say servant leadership.
If I may add about servant leadership, one example, you guys may remember Chobani, the yogurt.
Yeah.
And then you remember when the guy, when he sold it off, what he did? Anybody remembers? He gave the employees big money when he sold it. He gave them big bonuses, like $100,000 or something, for each employee. He said, "Thank you, you worked with me, and I was successful because of you." And he gave them big bucks. I don't remember the amount, but he gave them a lot of financial reward, servant to the people. And his management style was unbelievable, unheard of. But I think that was a good example of servant leadership. Ken, what are you thinking?
So an example that comes up for me, and I'm going to kind of go get on the coattails of Jeff,
Okay.
is democratic. And there, what you're really trying to do is to make sure that all your voices are heard.
Good
And
point.
and you're really driving for employee engagement. And an example of a company that does that and has done it well is Google. And you know, and it's like, you know, and you know, there's not just Google now. There's ABC too, right? I mean,
All right, the alphabet.
if you look at just all the different industries and the things that they're trying to do, and part of their culture is to give their employees the ability to research and look into things that are outside of their current job. I mean, it's just they have the opportunity just to investigate anything that is of interest to them, and it may become part of the Google family.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Jeff, anything you want to add on that?
I just, one example that just popped in my mind as we were, talking about this is an old one. I think of Henry Ford.
Mhm.
And
Oh,
go and it probably circle back to Dave's autocratic leadership style. A couple examples I think of Henry Ford being autocratic is, you guys probably are familiar. All the people watching are familiar. You can have any color Ford you want as long as it's black.
yeah.
And so that even to the customers, he was autocratic to the customers. And then the other example that just sticks in my mind was when his engineers came to him. They had inline engines, and Henry Ford said he wanted a V8 engine block made, and his engineers said it's impossible to do. And he said, "I want it anyway. Go do it." And that to me is a pretty clear example of somebody who was autocratic and ended up being very successful in
Right.
business. It'd be interesting to be able to kind of go back in time and talk to all those engineers and all those people he told those things to see what they thought about that style. But at least for the company and for him, it seemed to be a pretty successful style for the time.
Right.
And it's and you to go with your car analogy, and when you were talking about that, it makes me think of the movie Tucker, and he was so transformational, but didn't have the business acumen and everything else that was really required to go with it, and just so much of that stuff just fell by the wayside.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll be
yeah,
honest
go
with you.
ahead.
I've got a handful of people that are contacts that work at Tesla, and I think I would say that Elon is a bit of a autocrat as well.
Yeah.
I don't know, he's getting transformational stuff done, but there are things done within those walls that they're definitely his way or the highway.
Yeah,
So
I would agree.
Yeah,
He's
but
definitely
he's
strong personality.
But and that brings up one of the leadership styles that isn't real commonly known, and at times I think Elon Musk has exhibited a charismatic leadership style. If you think back, I had the opportunity to go to a PhD commencement at Caltech for a friend of mine, someone that had been interned with me, and Elon Musk was the commencement speaker, and he was talking about SpaceX and Tesla and everything else. So very inspirational and transformational from that perspective. But then you read about the way that Tesla treats his employees and the communities that he's in and things like that. And yeah, it's very autocratic, and so it's an example of how you can have both leadership styles, and you apply them when you need them and when it makes sense.
I remember the automation, the robotics, when he told his his engineers, automate robotic everything, but there are some processes, the very limited robotics and automation can do, and some of their projects did not pan out, and they had a lot of struggles, and then they had to go back and do it. But I like the robots. They call them the Wolverines and other names, the X-Men, pretty neat, and some of them really big, huge. Okay, I'm gonna jump to share with some of you. We talked about leadership and different, but what I like and a good example is Steve Jobs, and I shared that with you guys earlier. And interesting, when he started, in the computers and stuff, he was more or less laissez-faire leader. Hey guys, keep working. We're gonna get a new product and so forth, and but Apple went through some financial difficulties, and then he, for some reason, during his path, he adjusted and learned to adapt and became a democratic participative leader later, as well transactional with technology innovation and the iPhone and so forth. But he first, there was no structure, no task, and then later on he became very structural, a roadmap and clear vision and so forth. And shared the passion for innovation and R&D and so forth. that was very transformational in a way, his leadership style. That was really big, one of my biggest examples. But the other question I have for you is this is can you guys with the recent events in Ukraine and this leadership style of Zelensky, what do you see his style in of course extraordinary time for Ukraine, and this guy, he's a actor, funny comedian, whatever. What's your guys' takes on his style and in the recent events? How do you describe his style? Dave, you want to give a stab at it? Any of the guys?
Sure, I guess I'll take a swat at it. So it's hard to put yourself in his shoes, right? I want to start there, right? That gentleman and his country are going through things that it would be pretty tough to imagine those kind of circumstances. I get the sense that he's adapting to the style that he believes is appropriate for the time. I don't have a good sense of what his true, Jeff brought it up earlier, the natural and adapted behaviors. I'm not sure what his natural style is. I know he's adapting right now on a day-to-day basis. And he's facing challenges that, I'm going to say it again, I think most of us in the business community, we kid ourselves if we think we can identify with the challenges that gentleman's facing. But I don't think that what we see on a day-to-day basis is probably his natural style.
Okay.
I tend to think, if I hear some of the things correctly about how Ukraine was even 6 to 8 months ago, maybe a year ago, I think he may have been more of an autocrat, but that's certainly not the hat he's wearing right now.
I'd probably say that where he's at right now is he's a pace setter. I think he's got a highly competent and motivated team right now.
Oh yeah.
And he's also showing them how to do it. He's leading by example. So I think he's I'd say that he's in pace setting mode right now.
Okay, Jeff.
Yeah, and I probably would add, I think even in a way he's a little bit of a visionary. He's given motivation and hope to the people there. From what I've seen, and so it's a little inspirational. So he's kind of got this. I think you can say he's got this vision that Ukraine should be its own country, and it shouldn't be a part of Russia. And so I think he's done a good job, communicating his vision for the way things ought to be. And I think it seems with what I've seen, he's been pretty successful rallying the people, to his ideas and his vision.
Absolutely.
And I think one of the things that's interesting hearing you guys all talk through all those different things. And I just think, it is so important that we talk about these styles, and if anybody says, well, I'm this style or I'm that style and that's it, I won't believe them, because I think that I think it depends on the situation. And Ken, you brought that up, maybe Dave, you brought it up. I mean, this leader there in Ukraine, I didn't even have any idea who he was before 2 weeks ago, because that wasn't something I paid much attention to. But you guys brought it up. I guarantee you his style changed because of the situation. And I think all leaders are in that thing when we talk about these styles. Depending on the situation, you might find yourself in many of these styles that we talked about today.
Good point. I totally agree. You've probably seen in my notes, there is no style fits all.
Yeah.
You got to react to the situation, whether in your R&D, whether in finance, you got to play different game, different rules, and tweak them, adjust them as you see the team works. We can start with the final word. Dave, you want to?
I'll try and make it quick. Yeah, I guess my final word is that I don't technically prescribe to leadership styles. My my approach has always been, and what I teach is behavior-based leadership. So I believe that you adapt your behaviors based on what the result is that needs to occur. And so you need to understand who you are. And if you don't have a style that's needed, well, then you'd better build somebody or find somebody on your team that does. You're not everything. You are not the team. You can be part of the team, but don't try and be everything. And if you really are one type of leadership and another type is needed, and you attempt to fake it until you make it, you're going to be seen as the fraud that you are, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
build the team. That would be my final word.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dave. Jeff, you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I'll go back to kind of point I made a little bit ago, is that to me, it's really important for leaders to understand probably what their natural style is, where they kind of tend to go most of the time, but also that they need to be adaptive to the situation and know that they probably need to have some skills beyond their natural inclination so that they can deal, like Dave talked about at the beginning. When you're in a crisis, if you're in another natural leadership style, you better be able to turn into an autocrat in that crisis to take care of it.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. Ken?
Yeah, I think as a leader, if you're going to build that circle of safety that you want to have around your team, it takes time to build trust. You need to be able to show a certain amount of vulnerability yourself, and that helps you become a better leader. And some of that comes from experience, but I think a lot of it comes from focusing and really having a care and a desire to help your team and to help your people.
Yeah, for me, and we'll stop here. I think, again, I mentioned the leadership. There is no style fits all. You gotta be flexible and adjusting the sails as the wind and all the variables with the boat and the sailing and everything. And sometimes we fight for the hearts before the minds, and we go for that. Take care of the people first, respect them, listen to them, engage them, and if you have the opportunity to work with them and make part of the decision, the buy-in and empowerment and all that good stuff. However, I understand in extraordinary times, some decision making, you got to take some executive decisions and you got to live with them, because that's why you get paid the big bucks.
Thanks for watching, and remember, leadership matters.